So, Marianne Williamson was quoted as saying, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." And I'm going to point something out to you. That you are powerful beyond measure. You might not recognize this as your inherent truth because it's not always encouraged or facilitated. In fact, in some ways it may be unknowingly subdued. And this is due to two very powerful forces that could inhibit your growth and your empowerment. And for the purposes of this discourse, it's operationalized as Maslow's definition of self-actualization. So the two forces, the first are social movements, and these are movements towards overstimulation, techno-based artificiality, diversion. And the second being the body. And the body certainly is reflective of what it is bombarded with. Take also into account that we have a lot of unresolved conflicts going on in relation to ourself, others, and to our society, and we'll get a little bit more into that in depth later. Both of these problems can disrupt foundational physical and psychological health. These are necessary based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Thus, I propose, in response to this, the integration of nature and yoga in a temporary retreat format as an intervention towards greater foundational health, thus paving the way for self-actualization to occur. And by the way, that's yoga, not yoga. Self-actualization is defined by Maslow as a level of attainment where an individual has the full capacities of their potentialities, talents, and abilities. It is a dynamic state of living, fully, creatively, and joyfully. He basically pointed it as optimal health and wellness. And he's quoted as saying that self-actualizers are more matured and more fully human. And this is basically because their basic needs are being gratified. And that allows them to move into higher ways of being. Maslow talked about peak experiences or mystic experience and how they can be a component of self-actualizers. They aren't always, but they can be. A peak experience is defined as a short burst of illumination that invokes emotion such as bliss and fulfillment and thinking in new and novel ways. Maslow's quoted as saying about peak experiences, "When we are well and healthy and adequately fulfilling the concept human being, the experiences of transcendence should in principle be commonplace." And he found particular activities and settings that acted as catalysts in that regard. And we've got solitude, prayer, meditation, deep relaxation, physicality, and being in nature. And again, he proposed that there's a level, it's almost like a pyramid of a hierarchy that lays the foundation for movements towards self-actualization. Overall health and wellness has a significant impact on an individual's capacity to attain a level of optimal development. You can imagine it with self-actualization at the top and a number of smaller levels. And if a smaller level doesn't hold, and if it isn't stable, it's like Jenga, man. You know, you pull out all the pieces and it falls right down. So thus, problems of a physical nature and psychopathologies would greatly hinder an individual's ability to become self-actualized. And Maslow's quoted as saying that self-actualizers are sufficiently free of illness. Social movements themselves can be reflective of Maslow's work on individual psychological health. It was recently proposed by Loss that social movements can disrupt foundational aspects of health, either supporting or inhibiting growth towards self-actualization. She posited classifications of psychologically healthy and psychologically unhealthy social movements. The first one is an open populist movement, and this is a psychologically healthy society. An open populist movement is characterized by inclusivity of others, it's flexible, it's open to expression, allowing differences of opinion, having basic trust in human nature, valuing people over ideology, having an open-ended learning process, and allowing individuals to discover self-knowledge. Very important. Whereas a psychologically unhealthy society is known as a closed populist movement. And this is characterized as exclusive, inflexible, repressive, rigid, lacking trust, valuing ideology over people, having a closed learning process, and impeding self-knowledge which inhibits self-actualization. Pay attention to those. So a society that displays a closed populist movement can manifest pathology. And also the individuals in that society can experience a lack of validation and worth. Maslow indicated that pathology and a lack of validation and worth were the antithesis of self-actualization. Similar to Loss, Walsh proposed that in today's modern age, with accelerated movements in technology and human beings spending a great deal of time in artificial environments, a number of very, very unhealthy social trends can occur. Let me define artificial environments. They are the opposite of things natural: trees, grass, bodies of water, including concentrations of homes, buildings, and other man-made structures that are often fraught with overcrowding, pollution, and constant noise. Artificial environments can also, and this is interesting, be composed of non-natural spectra and rhythms that can negatively impact an individual. And basically, to the layperson, that's just bad vibrations. So in conjunction with these environments, these man-made artificial environments that we create, comes the possibility, the very likely possibility, of us using multimedia technology. How many of you have something of that nature with you right now? I would guess probably most of you. I've got it right here too. Guilty. So multimedia technology is defined as a form of computer software that combines two or more of the following: video, audio, photographs, text, graphs, animation, and computer programs stored in digital form on magnetic or optical media, which can be displayed on a video screen in which the user can interact. So you can actually become overstimulated and overly immerse yourself in this kind of stimuli. And if you do, it can have neurological implications that can sometimes be to your detriment. Study has also shown that media overstimulation can result in pathology with psychological and physical costs. These advances have influenced a variety of dynamics of our life, and they are anticipated to continue to create substantial change in our society. And with that, research has shown that significant technological advances create not only societal change, but also profound changes to the brain, sometimes detrimental. And then we have resultant new pathologies associated with this. These are interesting. Continuous partial attention deficit trait, digital fog, techno-brain burnout, ineffective multitasking, and addictions such as online compulsive disorder. As if we didn't have enough in the DSM, right? Study also shows negative social effects associated with multimedia reality. It can lead to people being divorced from real events and real people. It really can cut down on people's socialization and social networks. And this in itself can present existential concerns. Barrett, back in 1962, and seeing that we were moving in this direction, likened technology trends as humanity cutting the self off from its natural roots of being. So in reflection with these sometimes deleterious social trends, body-based problems can arise in being continually bombarded. Schilling defined the body as a metaphor of society, and that social forces can possibly construct and inferably deconstruct the body. Similarly, Dykewald indicated that the impact of external effects can manifest in physical problems, and those are known as frozen histories. This is defined as a physical manifestation of stuck or frozen emotional aspects from a person's history, both personal and interpersonal. Such stuck aspects can deeply impact the character, health, functioning, and overall physical structure of the individual. And that work is based on the work of William Reich. William Reich observed a number of his patients, and he came up with the concept of body armor. This is defined as unresolved psycho-emotional conflicts that manifest in the muscle tissue. Though it serves some kind of purpose in encasing painful stimuli from the person's history, it can limit the individual in the here and now and really cut down on their quality and capacity to live. Similarly, Feldenkrais believed that body and being are continually influenced by heredity, personal factors, culture, and in response we develop a network of physical habit patterns that define these influences. Sometimes they serve a purpose, sometimes they're functional, but very often he's quoted as saying that they can be maladaptive and limiting. So what now, in light of all of this? Well, a possible solution to the impact of these forces might be the integration of nature and yoga. Recent research has shown the positive benefits of immersion in nature, and you can see a number of things right there. And research has also shown the positive physical and psychological benefits of yoga. And we'll get more into detail with that in a little bit. It's important to note that a review of the literature did not reveal an empirically based study of the integration of yoga and nature retreat. What follows is a lit review of the benefits of both nature and yoga, and later potentials for their integration as a retreat, and some research that supports that. Benefits of nature. Study has shown that nature is conducive to spiritual expression, a common trigger for transcendent experience. It has positive effects on the self, including authenticity, greater interpersonal confidence, reconsideration of values, psychological well-being, and it can lead to restoration, flow experiences, personal growth, self-sufficiency, independence, and creativity and inspiration. Nature is also used therapeutically because of all of these reasons in the fields of wilderness therapy and experiential education. There's a whole bunch of studies out there that have indicated the effectiveness of both of these interventions for personal growth, change, and health and wellness. And also, most importantly, nature makes canines happy. And there is my canine being very happy. She's the best, man. Now, yoga lit review. Yogic is a body-based practice and philosophy that proposes that the body holds a number of forces, feelings, limits, and possibilities. What's really interesting in this perspective is that the limits have the potential to change and restructure. And in this idea that as the body changes, so does the individual. Studies on yoga show that it positively impacts various cognitive and physiological variables, including fluid intelligence, abstract thinking, and memory and cognitive abilities. Studies have also indicated positive effects on psychological and emotional functioning, and thus, yoga therapeutic interventions are used with a diversity of disorders, both physical and psychological. And there's a few right there: neuropsychiatric disorders, hypertension, diabetes, and anxiety and depression. Yoga has also been shown to bring forward positive aspects of personality, or sattvic attributes, and these are defined as fearlessness, purity of heart, control over senses, truthfulness, absence of anger, renunciation, peacefulness, and compassion towards other beings. And now bridging it all together. If both wilderness and yoga are positive interventions towards psychological and physical health, would a combination be useful? Well, Block stated that the experience of adulthood in social circumstances offers very stable niches that rarely demand a reconfiguration of our worldview. This inhibits the potential for further growth. Other research has proposed that cognition and psychological structures are continually interacting with life circumstances, and the nature, no pun intended, and scope of this interaction can be relevant to whether an individual grows. So based on this notion, our normal day-to-day operations just aren't going to cut it. They actually could be inhibiting our growth because they keep us in these stable places. Therefore, novel interventions, such as those that might be obtained in a nature-based yoga retreat, might be useful in breaking individuals out of these stable niches, while facilitating their physical and psychological health, and in so doing, open the possibility of self-actualization to occur. In support of this hypothesis, researchers pointed to the positive benefit of novel interventions that would suggest self-actualization. Manners and Durkin developed a model of how and why ego change occurs. They proposed that movements towards states similar to self-actualization or stage change require a challenging event. And this event needs to be disequilibrating, salient, and emotionally engaging. And they found through their research that in implementing interventions of this regard, a number of individuals were able to move up a stage of ego development, and that they were comparing to self-actualization. In wilderness therapy, we see very similar perspectives. Chris related that the experiential components of wilderness therapy works because it engages all sensory systems towards learning change processes. So he states here, the multisensory processing that occurs in a wilderness setting with interventions accounts for a higher level of cognitive action with increased memory that leads to subsequent change in the individual. And experiential learning theories posit that learning is enhanced when an individual is placed outside ordinary day-to-day experience and into a state of dissonance where change can occur. So facilitating the experiential component of nature is a way for individuals, through challenges, through interventions, to grow psychologically in their health, in their wellness, but more importantly, in their growth. And some of the interventions that are used in experiential education and wilderness therapy are rock climbing, backpacking, mountaineering, and kayaking. Thus, the research seems to indicate that these interventions have been successful in providing benefit to individuals. And thus, physicality itself, used experientially in nature, has been shown to be very, very valuable. And from that standpoint, it would seem logical that yoga would be a useful intervention in a wilderness setting, especially since a significant body of research supports its benefit. And in conjunction with that, it's important to note that individuals with somatic trainings, such as yoga, seem to develop a higher level of control over brain functioning. And this has really gotten the attention of the medical community. And they've begun to recognize and realize more and more the value of Eastern mind-body practices such as yoga. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but a review of the literature did not reveal an empirically based study of the integration of wilderness and yoga. So in conjunction with looking at each singularly, I looked at research utilizing yoga that would closely fit what it is that I'm proposing. So I went with temporary indoor yoga retreats. And in those studies, I found a number of successes towards psychological and physical improvements in conjunction with expansive personal growth. Temporary yoga retreat has been shown to facilitate increased spiritual development, well-being, meaning in life, decreased anger, increased connection with others, awareness of inner strength and guidance, confidence in handling problems, and arrest of physical deterioration from disease. And finally, this is an interesting one, greater involvement in self-care. Wow, what an important thing for clinicians and transpersonalists. This was a very, very interesting study that was conducted in 2008 with individuals with debilitating back problems. These researchers set up a retreat environment where these individuals were practicing yoga for 7 days. And at the end of the 7 days, they had a 49% reduction in their disability with a significant increase in spinal flexibility. And this is impressive because this is comparable to another study that was done a little bit earlier, over 16 to 32 weeks. They had almost the exact same results. And in addition to the 49% reduction, there was that increase in spinal flexibility, which did not occur in the study that was over the substantial period of time. This seemed to indicate that the brief retreat with greater focus could be more beneficial than a long-term intervention that's spread out over time. Another interesting study by Wilson and Spencer, they studied individuals practicing yoga in a yoga ashram environment. And a lot of what they found in their study were a number of references towards self-actualization. One of the most important pieces in all of this is that they were able to define that the yoga practice itself in a retreat environment led to highly positive experiences that involved an altered state of consciousness perceived as having a lasting impact. And they define this as a peak experience based on Maslow's definition of that. So based on this research, could it not be equally as beneficial to do yoga at home or in an ashram environment? Well, based on research into the benefits of retreating, the answer to that would be no. Research regarding the beneficial aspects of retreating has shown that nature-based environments are optimal in the retention of such benefits. McDonald et al. Has posited reasons for such findings. Here's a nifty graph for you. They stated that the aesthetic quality of nature plus the removal from negative effects of society leads to restoration. And in restoration, there is a capacity for the person to grow and experience peak experiences due to nature's restorative element. And this is based on Kaplan and Kaplan's theory of restorative elements, and I'll briefly get into that, where they state that in our day-to-day action, our focus is worn thin due to competing stimuli, such as those that we find in our artificial environments, the cell phone, the kids, social demands, and whatever. Our original focus can be recollected by putting ourselves in a place where we can inhibit potential distractions. This facilitates restoration for the individual. And restoration is best achieved by seeking out settings like nature that make minimal demands on the individual. And thus, nature-based environments are optimal in this regard. Phenomenological evidence from Hines indicated how the backdrop of nature affects dimensions of personality in very, very positive ways. He stated, similar to McDonald et al., that the aesthetic attraction and remoteness of nature seems to provide the opportunity to experience the self completely. And he pointed out that this is in alignment with Maslow's theory of self-actualization. Thus, without societal forces impinging the individual, they're free to express themselves. One thing to note here is the potential of the nature-based experience to have a positive therapeutic effect on the self. And this includes authenticity, development of greater interpersonal confidence, reconsideration of values, and psychological well-being. It's just a win-win. So thus, based upon the literature, nature seems to be optimal as a place to retreat. Hence, it can be inferred that its environmental benefits could potentially enhance the practice of yoga. So in envisioning this as a possible intervention, it's important to recognize that possibility is available to you. That is important and vital. Maslow himself is quoted as saying, "The advancement of knowledge of the higher life of values should make possible not only greater understanding, but also should open up new possibilities of self-improvement, of improvement of the human species, and of all its social institutions." So thus, I invite all of you to open to the realm of possibility, not only for yourself, but for others. And in so doing, allowing yourself to be who you are, to be powerful beyond measure. Thank you. There's some references, so you know I didn't make all this up. Any questions?
A few, actually.
Yeah, shoot.
I wondered if in the literature at all it talked about the experience of, from the brief amount I know about wilderness therapy, it's typically groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in the literature talking about the experience of being in a group in retreat?
Most of it, most of the literature deals with group based stuff.
And the benefits?
Yeah, yeah, and even the yoga based stuff. You know, it's all primarily in groups.
And so the intervention that you're thinking of doing, would that be
Group
intervention?
Yeah, it's the path of least resistance. So. Okay.
Where would you ideally like to do your yoga retreats? Where in nature? Where would be, say, a few of your favorite places? If money weren't an issue.
If money weren't an issue. I really have a resonance with Sedona.
Sedona.
Yeah, if it were at all possible, I would really like to do it there. I used to live in Arizona, and I used to camp up in Flagstaff and Sedona area every summer, and it just was so recharging. And I actually got the idea of this as a possibility from watching this younger couple doing all kinds of yoga asanas on the Red Rock. It was very interesting to watch. So, yeah.
I'd just like to hear you comment on this thought. I have this notion that our technology and our modern environments are not actually unnatural, but they are actual natural extensions of the progress of humanity, although we may not have yet found out how to live in them healthily.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that idea at all?
Well, I'll tell you what. I go home every night and you know, I watch Hulu or Netflix, or you know, I play PlayStation. You know, or I get on my email and you know, or I look up something that pops into my head. So, you know, there is that very real possibility that this is here and it's here to stay, and it's a reality. It's a part of our lives. However, what I'm pointing to is its potential to distract us to the point where we don't connect with ourselves and we don't connect with other people. There's an amazing experience that I was privileged to be a part of on the Eastern Seaboard shortly after 9/11, when the entire Eastern Seaboard lost electricity for like 2 days. And it was a very interesting phenomenon because people were out talking. There were community gatherings. I had never seen anything like it, and it just had such a vibrancy, and it was so enjoyable. And it was an amazing experience. And then the next night, the electricity went on. And there was no one out there, you know. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think that, you know, there are a lot of ways to look at it. You know, it saves lives, it saves time, it can rescue people. A GPS can save somebody from, you know, there are technologies that can be implanted into a person's body to regulate. So there are a number of benefits. But I think like anything beneficial, there can be the dark side of the force.
Can I just comment on that? I do think many people tend to idealize the past. And I think that in the past, when we had either very rudimentary technologies or no modern technologies, perhaps people were more bored than they are now, but were people healthier? I'm not sure I know the answer to that question.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting study.
It'd be an impossible study.
Well, I think that you could do something qualitative with that. You know, I think you get access to a lot of journals and records, and
I think some retrospective studies could
Yeah.
could be, generational retrospective longitudinal studies might be possible to research that aspect.
And by the way, like being in contact with nature is not a thing of the past.
Well,
No.
I don't suggest that it is.
I mean,
No, yeah.
Yeah.
many, a big part of humanity lives in close contact with humanity,
Yeah.
with nature.
Mm.
And other thing that I was going to comment is that later I'm going to present in a rehabilitation treatment in the Peruvian Amazon, and I practice yoga with the patients three times a week for 2 years, and I got it published. So maybe looking another in Spanish could be a way to find literature, or to specify there's no literature in English in this and that sources.
Yeah.
Also because I know that for years now in Costa Rica there's a big movement of permaculture and yoga, and they're kind of all year long there are a lot of retreats of yoga and working, doing organic gardening and being in nature and that sort of thing.
Yeah. But you're right, it's not anything new. Ancient yogis would go into the wilderness and practice asanas and pranayama and
Not in yoga much, probably.
yeah. Yeah. So what I'm pointing out is nothing new. I just think in light of some of the different things that we're facing as human beings, we can take something that could be a lifelong experience of, I'm avoiding all of this technology and I'm becoming a renunciate, or we can take brief interludes in our lives to reset and recharge and facilitate growth and change in ourselves, which I think is more doable. So,
Can I say something else?
yeah.
Well, I really like your presentation first.
Thanks.
Yeah, and actually I'll be interested in the references later, if possible.
Sure.
But I appreciate the literature review that you offered. I was going to say that, man, I forgot my question with all the compliments I just gave.
Compliments.
I truly forgot, sorry.
Sorry.
It will come.
Last thing you were talking about the brief interludes, and you had mentioned that in the review as well, that the brief yoga interventions seem to have more benefit than the long-term yoga. Was there anything about why that is?
Well, the researchers said the concentrated action, that it created a tremendous amount of focus. And I think something like that could be useful. I think that it just depends on the individuals and the population. I would wager there's all kinds of contingencies to take into account.
I remember now. I was just going to say that at a certain point you mentioned the benefit of retreat over daily practice or practicing your own environment. Is that right? And I think, of course, it should be complementary. Like, it's great
Sure.
to have times of retreat, but then I'm thinking that our closest access to nature that we have in our daily lives is our body. Like, I feel, or I tend to think of my body as nature, as a forest where I go, and retreat when I do my yoga practice or meditation practice. It's like, and maybe that's, I don't know, the mystics of the past, there was way much more nature available
Yeah.
to go and retreat. So to be a spiritual seeker, you would go into the forest and sit under the tree or practice your asanas. But I think now probably the gesture, kind of living in modern cities, is to retreat into the body on a daily basis and see if you're eating the way you need to eat, if you're sleeping the way you need to sleep, if you exercise the way you need to exercise, if you cleanse your mind and that stuff. So I think it's very important to keep it very fluid between how interesting is to have time for retreat and a daily visiting. And,
Sure. Any learning and change is only going to be facilitated by practice. And taking that intervention and those changes and putting it into some kind of, body memory or, somatic memory, and that's really the only way that change is going to continue to happen. So yes, I couldn't agree with you more, and that certainly wasn't my intent in that to say, hey, well, you don't need to do daily practice. Daily practice is vital. And daily practice would be vital in this intervention and, for anything that I develop as a dissertation program, because I really believe that learning and change, we can experience quantum change, but in order for that quantum change to continue to grow and expand, we need an intervention in there to keep it going. It's kind of like winding a watch. You want to get it going. So, any more questions?
Yeah.